Happy New Year, and welcome to the first edition of the Baseball Weekend Journal, a weekly podcast covering some of the biggest stories in and around Major and Minor League Baseball. I'm your host, Paul Shivari. This week, I'll be seeing what's been cooking on the hot stove, which free agents have been signed, and who is still looking for a home in 2016. The Hall of Fame vote will be revealed this Wednesday. I'll give my take on who will make it in, who deserves to make it in, and who may miss the call this time around. And I'll talk with Robert Casey from BleedingYankeeBlue.com about some of the moves the Yankees have made this offseason and where he sees this team headed in the upcoming season. All of this and more on the Baseball Weekend Journal for the week of January 2nd, 2016. This year's offseason, like many others, has been exciting, seeing big-name players change uniforms and watching how clubs prepare themselves for a pennant run in 2016 and beyond. The biggest signing was David Price inking a 7-year, $217 million deal with the Boston Red Sox, who desperately needed pitching. The biggest surprise was seeing Zach Greinke stay in the National League West division, but not with the Dodgers or the Giants, but with the Arizona Diamondbacks, who also made one of the most interesting trades to bring in another starting pitcher in Shelby Miller, sending last year's number 1 overall draft pick Dansby Swanson over to the Atlanta Braves, along with Ender Inciarte and Aaron Blair. There are still many good players still available. For teams looking for outfielders, guys like Yoenis Cespedes, Justin Upton, Alex Gordon, Alex Rios, Gerardo Parra, and Dexter Fowler are still unsigned and will more than likely find homes within the next couple of weeks. There are still a lot of good starting pitchers available. Starting pitching is a premium position in baseball, and teams like the St. Louis Cardinals, New York Yankees, and Los Angeles Dodgers, to name a few, could benefit from the services of some of the players available. Wei-Yin Chen, Kyle Kendrick, Ian Kennedy, and Giovanni Gallardo have the most upside. Older pitchers such as Tim Hudson, Aaron Harang, and Cliff Lee could be short-term options. Cliff Lee is recovering from a partially torn flexor tendon, but has postseason experience and may be an asset to a playoff-bound team that is in desperate need of a left-handed pitcher in their starting rotation. On the topic of pitchers with injuries, Yolis Chacin has struggled with injuries, but did manage to make 4 starts in 2015, striking out 21 batters in 26 2/3 innings. The Atlanta Braves signed him to a minor league deal 2 weeks ago, and he could see a bounce-back season for himself in 2016. That is someone to keep an eye out for this year, as he could be a possible trade piece for teams looking to pad their pitching around the trade deadline in July. As far as how teams have fared so far this offseason, I think the St. Louis Cardinals haven't done enough to remain in competitive standing. They have lost their best pitcher from 2015 in John Lackey, and their best hitter in Jason Hayward. While they do have Adam Wainwright returning for hopefully a full season, and the addition of Mike Leake to the rotation, the loss of Lance Lynn to Tommy John surgery will still put them in a tougher position than they have been used to despite the adversity they have seen in the injury department in previous years. The Cards stand to benefit on the offensive side of the ball with the returns of Matt Holliday and Matt Adams, but they will need those players to stay healthy. Having Yadier Molina suffer from a thumb injury late in the season cost them down the stretch. For me, last season is a clear indicator that the Cardinals need to start trending younger if they want to maintain the success that they've seen in the early goings of this century. The team that has done the most to improve on where they left off last season is easily the Chicago Cubs. They solved the logjam that they had at shortstop by moving Starlin Castro to second base during the year, but they have since flipped him to the Yankees to bring in Adam Warren to bolster what was already one of the top bullpens in the league. The addition of John Lackey to the rotation will solve some of the issues they had coming out of the back end of their rotation, and it could only be good that Lackey and John Lester are good friends who saw championship success in Boston back in 2013. Utility player Ben Zobrist, reuniting with Joe Maddon, his manager in Tampa Bay, now gives Maddon more tools in his bag of tricks and will cover the open spot at second base now that Castro is gone. But the largest offensive move made by the Cubs in the offseason is that they brought in Jason Hayward from the Cardinals. While I think the loss of Dexter Fowler at the top of the batting order could have a negative effect on the Cubs' offense, I do think taking a productive bat out of a division rival's hand is a bonus for a club that put together 97 wins last year, which was good for a third-place finish in the Central Division. The Cubs should have no problem getting back to the playoffs and will more than likely do it as the Central Division champs in the National League. And what's scary is they might not even be done with their offseason tinkering. Rumors of bringing in Andrew Miller as the closer have surfaced, but it would take trading away a younger bat like Jorge Soler or Javier Baez in order to do it. Keep a close eye on the Cubs as they look to become a perennial powerhouse in the senior circuit. Next week, I'll continue covering the hot stove and talk about the moves that are made in the next week. The 2016 Hall of Fame ballot results will be unveiled this Wednesday. This year's first-timers are Jim Edmonds, Jason Kendall, Troy Glaus, Mike Hampton, Luis Castillo, Randy Wynn, Garrett Anderson, Mike Lowell, Billy Wagner, Trevor Hoffman, Mark Grudzielanek, Mike Sweeney, David Eckstein, Brad Ausmus, and a surefire candidate for first-year induction, Ken Griffey Jr. While Ken Griffey Jr. should have no problems getting in this year, this will mark the final year for Tigers infielder Alan Trammell and the second to last year for longtime closer Lee Smith. For Smith, the odds of him making it aren't as high, as Hall of Fame voters really haven't figured out what to do with closers yet. There has been only one full-time reliever inducted to the Hall, and that was Bruce Sutter back in 2006. Lee Smith is ranked number 3 overall in career saves behind likely Hall of Fame candidate Mariano Rivera and Trevor Hoffman, who might not make it this year, but should get plenty of attention. Unfortunately for Smith, closers were used differently than Rivera and Hoffman were in their era. Some of Smith's 478 saves came at a time when there really weren't a lot of one-inning save closers and role players out of the bullpen that we see in the majors nowadays. For Smith, a 7-time All-Star, this is a bit of an injustice. His numbers compared to Bruce Sutter certainly would suggest that he belongs in the Hall of Fame, but he continues to be up against strong first-year contenders like Griffey, as well as the usual suspects that have the tainted reputation of being involved with steroids. We'll get to those players in a moment, but for what it's worth, Lee Smith would be on my ballot. I just don't think he will have the 75% of the vote needed to be inducted this year. Perhaps next year he may get the 11th hour vote from the BBWAA. As for Alan Trammell, while I think he was a remarkable player, he probably doesn't get the call into Cooperstown this year. If he were to make it in, it would have to be by the Veterans Committee, and who knows how long that could be if it were ever to happen. The Veterans Committee hasn't elected a player for induction since Deacon White was selected on the pre-integration ballot back in 2012. And with the rules in place for induction by the Veterans Committee now, Alan Trammell would have to get his first shot later this year and every 3 years after that if he doesn't get elected. The past 2 years, there have been multiple players inducted, with many first-timers on the ballot getting the call. Before that, there was a year in which no players were inducted by the Baseball Writers Association of America. This year will definitely be Griffey's year. I think he may have the company of Mike Piazza joining him this summer for the class of 2016. There's also a good chance that we could see Jeff Bagwell or an outside shot of Tim Raines getting the call. I don't think Bagwell or Raines will get in this year, but I do think that they both deserve it. What makes this process so difficult is that the BBWAA is only limited to their 10 votes per ballot, and that a player needs to be on 75% of the ballots in order to make it to the Hall. In addition to this, there is an uncertainty by many voters on how they should treat their players who are associated with steroid usage. Players who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame based on their numbers like Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and to a lesser extent Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, and Rafael Palmeiro. It should be noted that with the newer rules in place for eligibility, this will be Mark McGwire's 10th and final year on the ballot. He will most likely not become a Hall of Famer. I think players with steroids attached to their names shouldn't be treated with the same lifetime ban that Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson received. Major League Baseball didn't regulate the steroid era enough to know how to properly deal with the legacy of these players, and some of these players were never actually found guilty of taking steroids. While I think they shouldn't be banned from baseball, I think we should treat their numbers with steroids in mind. 500 home runs used to be a sacred number for a career in baseball. But with the possibility of steroids looming over the heads of some of these aforementioned players, the number 500 doesn't seem so lofty with performance-enhancing drugs aiding them. Last week, Ken Rosenthal from Fox Sports released his ballot results and had Bonds and Clemens on his list of 10, but left McGwire off. And in case you were wondering, the remaining 8 players on his ballot were Griffey, Piazza, Bagwell, Raines, Hoffman, Edgar Martinez, Curt Schilling, and Mike Mussina. Join us next week as I'll discuss the Hall of Fame voting results and the careers of those who will get the call to the Hall. All right, I'm talking with Robert Casey, the founder-in-chief of BleedingYankeeBlue.com. He joins us on the very first episode of Baseball Weekend Journal, and he's on to talk about the New York Yankees and the direction of the team this offseason, coming off of last year's AL wildcard loss to the Houston Astros. He was a frequent guest on some of my past shows, and I'm happy to have him here right now. Robert, Happy New Year. How are you doing?
Happy New Year. How are you? I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
I'm doing great as well. I'm so happy to have you join me, and I hate to bring up that the Yankees lost the AL wild card last year, but it seemed like they kind of went above expectations last year. Did you feel the same way?
We did so much better than everyone thought. So getting there was great, but the reality is, I think a lot of us fans knew going into that playoff game, we were probably not going to win it. I mean, you don't want to ever act like that as a fan, but we did so well, so much better than we thought that, when we finally got there, it was almost like we were exhausted from it. So, we wanted to win. We didn't get a win. With the tools we had, even if we made it past that game, the likelihood of us getting much further would have been tricky.
Well, I think it's good to have a sense of reality about your team, and I think that's one of the greatest things about BleedingYankeeBlue.com is, you guys don't drink the Kool-Aid. You don't sugarcoat things. If the team is playing bad, you guys are quick to call it out. And that's even kind of how the website was started, was kind of based off of a rant against the team and how you wanted better expectations from the team. But do you think that you had the negative expectations in the AL wildcard game because the Yankees were so gassed out, or do you think because the Astros were just playing so hot and they're so young and full of talent?
Well, listen, the Yankees shouldn't have been there. I mean, that's the reality of it. And we got there, and the Astros were just so good. You were waiting for, the other shoe to drop, so to speak, and these young players would come up, and you just knew it was going to happen, and then it would happen. It reminded me a lot of, the 98 Yankees or, one of those young teams where they were scrappy, yet they had the power and they had the ability to do anything. They were just that good. So you as a fan, you're scared of it. Almost because they're so good, but you never want to speak of it. That's, like you said, that's the reality of BYB. That's why we always try to give every side, every opinion of it, because some of us don't feel that way, but I myself do. So, and that's where we're at. I mean, now we're in a whole new season coming up.
So it seems like the Yankees have seemed quiet so far this offseason compared to most years when they're going after the biggest free agents available. They've made two notable trades this offseason, the biggest being the recent one where they got Aroldis Chapman from the Cincinnati Reds. Were you surprised by the Yankees going after such a dominant closer, despite the fact that Andrew Miller had such a great season last year?
I think that there's really some truth to the Cashman's hinting that Miller was going to be possibly traded. I think that they were looking for a starter. That could still happen, by the way. We've written about it on our blog as well, that they may even look for a starter to try to flip Miller and maybe a Brett Gardner for. But the reality is there's also another side of the coin, and that is the Yankees have starters that are good, but there is definitely a worry of injury. You got Tanaka with that elbow. You got Sabathia with the knee. And those are two big guys that you worry about. Nathan Eovaldi's coming off an injury, so you just don't know what to expect there. They're going to change the landscape if they keep these three relievers and extend the bridge. And you will see starters, if they keep all three, lasting up to 5 to 6 innings. And it's actually crazy to me because I grew up with guys that were pitching 9, and you'd have one reliever like Goose Gossage that would go 3 and then get the save. It's a different reality. So here's what I think. I think Miller will, at this point, stay unless there's a sweet deal for a starter. And if he does stay, you have a very, very dominant bullpen.
Well, when you talk about those starters, too, it always kind of made me wonder why Ivan Nova was the most talked about starter that they want to move to try and bring someone back to the team. I know he's kind of coming off of his injuries as well, right. But it seems like he has the most upside out of anyone on that staff. But when you think of a guy like CC Sabathia, wasn't able to be with the team last year because he had to go in for rehab for his alcoholism, and I know this is helping him in his personal life, but do you think that sort of help now is going to give him a sense of maybe not returning to the type of ball player he was when he started with the ball club, but maybe trending back in that direction where he can regain some of his dominance a little bit?
Look, I don't know much about alcoholism, but I do know that it's a disease, and I do know that you need to be with your family, and if he can find the pieces he needs through that rehabilitation, yeah, it'll help him out. Now, the knee is cranky. There's no question about it, and that's a big factor with mechanics when you're pitching. And I just know because I deal with my own son throwing, and I watch these guys. I know how it all works, and I know that if that knee's not right, you're going to have some problems. Will it put him at peace with the fact that, yeah, he's on the track back? Yeah, but there's still going to be that struggle. There's still going to be that battle. And he's got to deal with the personal stuff, and he's got to deal with the injury. And while he says he's back, he feels great, he's ready to go, he said that a lot over the past 4 years. Doesn't mean that he's not going to do great this year, but you just don't know. And you know what? The guy is a gamer. I'm a huge Sabathia fan. I just know the guy wants to get back to his old form, but he may not. And, we're coming off the end of this contract, and that's pretty typical. So it's very possible that he could have a decent year, get over some struggles, get over the knee injury, and he could get 15 wins for us. That would be phenomenal, but I don't know if that's possible.
When you talk about the starting pitching and how the Yankees are kind of chasing that at this point, were you surprised that David Price wasn't really going to the Yankees, or that he ended up being paid so much by the Red Sox of all teams to end up with him?
Well, the Red Sox needed to do something, right? I mean, think about it. They were very bad last year. No pitcher is worth $217 million. And David Price, with a postseason record that he has, which is terrible, deserves that much money. So I was thrilled he wasn't coming to New York. I mean, he's not our guy. He's just not our guy. When you sense a player, and from your Chicago team, so you have a guy comes and signs, and you're like, oh great, this guy's the guy. He's the missing piece. There's also guys that come over, and you're like, I don't feel it. I don't feel like he wants it. I think he wants the money. I don't think he wants to play here. That's how I feel about David Price. I like David Price as a pitcher. I think he's got some good stuff. But we've always been able to handle David Price, so I'm not concerned about that. I do know that there was no way in hell the Yankees were going to throw $217 million at the guy. I'm happy he's in Boston. Good luck to him. I'm sure they'll do better than they did last year.
It's funny that you mention guys coming to Chicago with that sort of same attitude. That's kind of how I felt with Jeff Samardzija last year, where, I was kind of drinking that Kool-Aid of like, okay, well, maybe he could be their top righty. Maybe he could be a number two to Chris Sale. Samardzija grew up a White Sox fan, so I thought maybe there's a little bit of an element of his boyhood dream to play with the team. But, of course, you see he chases that money. He goes to San Francisco, right, and he has one of the worst seasons ever on record. And I personally saw one of his starts where he had 10 runs given up before the third inning. It was even over. So it was, it was kind of a dream that did not come true for White Sox fans. And you see how that turns out. So I know what you mean by not chasing the money with David Price, but it just seems like he has more success than, let's say, a guy like Samardzija. But aside from that, with the Red Sox, though, it looks like now they're ready to kind of compete again, and they're making big moves. Was that upsetting to see Chris Young end up on the Red Sox?
No. I mean, look, I've always liked Chris Young, Arizona Diamondbacks. I felt he rejuvenated himself in New York. I knew he wasn't going to re-sign in New York. As far as a guy like Chris Young, you just wish him well. He's just a likable guy. He does what he's asked to do. He doesn't complain. He just gets out there and does it. And after he was with the Mets and did so terribly, and no one could figure out why, he came to New York with the Yankees and rejuvenated himself. So you just root for a guy like that. So, is he going to hurt us with the Sox? There's going to be games where he's going to have, very good games against us. But a guy like that at this time in his career, you root for him because he's just a likable guy. He's not a Yankee, hopefully not a Yankee killer. But, that's how I feel about Young.
One of the more surprising moves coming out of the winter meetings last month was the trade between the Yankees and the Cubs, which brought in Starlin Castro to play second base. Castro only started playing second base last season with the Cubs. Before that, he was a shortstop, but he only played in 38 games last season at the position, and that's all he has for his career. Are you concerned that Castro's lack of experience playing second base could cost the Yankees defensively, or do you think he's a better option than re-signing Stephen Drew, that can't happen, or starting Dustin Ackley, or even developing Rob Refsnyder?
I have a very different take than one of our writers on my staff, Steve Skinner. Steve Skinner has always not been a fan of Stephen Drew. Wasn't a big fan of the idea of signing or trading for Castro. And what you say and what Steve say are identical. There should be no reason why the guy should be standing at second base for the New York Yankees if you're someone like Steve that writes for me regularly. That being said, I think the guy can handle it. Now, there are downsides. The guy struck out 91 times last year. You do wonder if defensively, if he can hack it at that position. I personally think he can. I'm the believer that you give these guys shots. The guy's a big name, and yes, the Yankees have a great ability to, I want to say brainwash, and I'd say that jokingly, that they want to almost try to get you to believe that what moves they made are absolutely brilliant. They did it with Drew for 2 years. Maybe they're doing it with Castro too, as Steve Skinner, my writer, suggests. I think you give him that shot. I think you have an extra bat in the lineup that could really do some damage. Rob Refsnyder, I love the guy. I want to see the guy develop and become our second baseman. But I don't know at this point if he's in the cards. I think they want to keep him down in the minors, see how he does. And I honestly believe from my heart that if there is a deal out there and his name is mentioned and they see some really good, payback from Castro, they are going to flip him for somebody. I don't want to see that happen, of course, but that is possible.
Well, it kind of makes me wonder, too. The Yankees gave up a prospect third baseman in order to get Aroldis Chapman. Do you think that they're almost giving up too much in their minor league system to get these players? I know that's kind of always been kind of the Yankee thing, but it seems like lately they've been developing great prospects. Do you think they're almost giving up too much, especially in the infield, to bring in these veteran talent?
I think that giving away Rookie Davis in that deal with the other three guys was the biggest a blow to the minor league system. They gave away four guys that were decent, that definitely had an upside, but they were not going to be outstanding players with the Yankees. Now they have the ability to go out there and actually get to the major leagues. There's no backlog, and they will play. With the Yankees, they may not have ever played. So, and you see a guy like Chapman who throws 103 miles an hour, and you say to yourself, why wouldn't I do this deal? So they gave away guys that the Reds didn't necessarily want, but those guys will blossom somewhere else. Will they be outstanding players? I couldn't tell you that. We've been burned before, so you just don't know. But you know what I'm saying.
Well, and that also kind of makes me bring up Greg Bird. It seems like he's waiting in the wings to take over at first base, but Mark Teixeira is getting in the way. I know Teixeira is getting a little bit older, but Teixeira had a great season last year. If Teixeira stays healthy, does that mean Greg Bird isn't really going to get his shot to play first base?
Well, Teixeira will not stay healthy, so that's the reality of it. Greg Bird was smart to suggest, hey, I'll get some more at-bats in the minor leagues if that's what it takes. The reality is Mark Teixeira, while, and I hate to bash the guy, and I'm not, because there are writers on my team, my staff that do not like Mark Teixeira. There are others that love him. Here's the reality from me. I like the guy. When he's healthy, he's great. He never stays healthy, so he's not, he's not going to be there a full season unscathed from injury. He's going to get injured. They're going to bring Bird up, and hopefully, we don't skip a beat. So that's as far as Mark. That's how I feel about it. Greg Bird is he's like a throwback to like the Jeter, Posada days, where he's happy to be there, trying to make his way up, knows what to say to the media, works his tail off every day, and he's a breath of fresh air. Mark Teixeira, my prediction, will probably get hurt at some point, and you'll see Bird. And there's not going to be any. Hopefully, there won't be any issue as far as him not coming up. I think he will be up.
Robert Casey, founder-in-chief of BleedingYankeeBlue.com, joins us on the Baseball Weekend Journal. Robert, last year, Didi Gregorius had the tough job of having to replace Derek Jeter at shortstop. How do you think he did in his first year full-time at the position?
Oh, considering Jeter was no longer there and everyone was looking at him, he did pretty good. I'm pretty proud of the guy. I thought he handled himself well. You know what? He had a lot of jitters early on, and that's totally understandable. People were killing him early. You know, people seem to forget, and a lot of people don't play baseball. They just watch it, and they just assume you can go out there and do your job perfect every day. I coach Little League. You know, it goes all the way back to that. The reality of it is you need to work, and, yeah, you get in your own head sometimes, and sometimes you just got to go out there and not think and play. And no matter what he said about, I'm not trying to be Derek Jeter, I'm not trying to impress everybody, I'm just trying to go out and do my job, it takes time. And he figured it out eventually, and then he got loose and he didn't think about it. He went out there and played, and he did all right. So, listen, I was never upset about that trade, about that signing when it happened. I have no issue with Gregorius, and I think he's going to be fine there.
You know, one of the biggest surprises for me for the 2015 season involving the Yankees was that A-Rod made for a pretty decent commentator for Fox Sports. What were your thoughts on that, and what was the biggest surprise of 2015 with the Yankees for you?
All right, well, A-Rod's got personality. We all knew that, and I think that he was just hated for so long that he really needed to come out of his shell and just go play. I mean, everyone's like, well, I had a conversation with one of my buddies last January. He said, I would be shocked if Alex Rodriguez could hit 12 home runs. And I'm thinking to myself, not that I was right, but I was right. The guy is probably the biggest workhorse of anyone I've ever seen. His work ethic is sick. And I'm like, I don't believe you. I don't believe it. And sure enough, he did a great service to the Yankees. He got back in our good graces. He served his time, and he played some good baseball. It actually didn't surprise me. So in that regard, and then of course, you know, when you're feeling good, you get your personality comes out, and you know, people started to understand that the guy is actually likable. He just makes really stupid choices and decisions, but everyone makes mistakes. So you know, in that regard, I think that you know, good for Alex. I expect him to be just as good as he was last year. That was probably my biggest surprise of 2015, just the way he presented himself and how he changed the fans' view of him.
Do you anticipate when he reaches near the 700 home run mark, I think he only has about 13 more to go, do you think that's going to be almost too much of a distraction on this team or for A-Rod?
I mean, we've dealt with distraction before. Our team there's so much distraction. I don't think it phases anyone. I think we just go business as usual in the Bronx. I mean, that's just the way it is.
And what are your expectations for 2016 in general? I mean, we already talked about Mark Teixeira versus Greg Bird. You know, A-Rod, and as he's approaching 700 home runs. What do you think is going to happen? What moves do you think are left to be made this offseason to improve the team?
I really think that Cashman's going to try to get a starter. I don't know how superior that starter will be. He has a reputation of going after guys that are cheaper, try to get a couple innings out of him, like Capuano, by the way. Like that was one of those guys you bring in and you hope he does well. And the first time we had him, he did well. The second time he couldn't pitch himself out of a paper bag, so it was horrible. So that's what Cashman will do. He'll try to get that extra starter that's not going to be like a top ace, but enough to get us through just in case, because you know some of these guys are going to break down or hopefully not get hurt, but they may. That's why you have the bridge. You set yourself up just in case. And you know, as far as my expectations, Yankees are the Yankees. They're going to go all the way. I mean, that's the mentality you have as a fan. You really want them to just do very well. I think we're going to be going into the season, and I think we're going to be doing much better than last year as far as what we think at day one. Day one last year, no one had a prayer, and we did so much better. I think this year we walk in a little bit more positive. We win a few more games. We do what we're supposed to do. rather than think we're going to fail from day one.
And do you think Andrew Miller is going to be a key piece that would be traded to bring in that starting pitcher?
Yeah, I do. But here's the thing with Cashman, because he's so genius at this. He's like a stealth cat. You just don't know what he's going to do. He dangled Garner and he dangled Miller, and I think he's being very strategic in how he finds his guys. And if that means he doesn't find that starter he wants, he doesn't do it. You know, Garner can still play. I think Gardner's value is up right now, and he's tradable. So that's why he's being dangled. You know, I don't think anyone wants to part with Miller. I like the guy. They like him personally. I like what he has. But I think it's the same thing. I think his value's up, and if you're able to trade for a high-level pitcher or higher-level pitcher, then you go for it. But, you know, this is business at the end of the day. And, you know, people get sad to get traded, but they go to another team and they play. And fans, they get pissed, and they can't believe that we would ever part with guys like Brett Gardner. But his value's up. I mean, you have to try to make a move to better your team. And he may not be in the cards. Miller may not be in the cards. But it's got to be the right deal. I don't think Cashman's foolish enough to just trade them away for some broken-down starter just to get through the season. I think it needs to be the right starter. And I think that he's looking around for the right starter.
And how do you feel about the American League East this year? I mean, do you think the Yankees are projected to be number one? Do you think are you afraid of any other teams, or do you think the Blue Jays, maybe their shot was in 2015 and they're not going to be the same team next year?
I think the Blue Jays are a good team, but I don't think they're going to have the same season. I could very well be wrong. I mean, I'm never good at prediction. I'm always afraid of Buck Showalter because it doesn't matter where the Orioles finished last year. That he has a way of bringing out a young club and making them do so much better. So I always worry about Buck. And as far as the Red Sox, I mean, they're ready to compete. They got some great players this offseason. I'm looking for them to not be dead last. They'll get it together too, and they'll have a great year.
All right, before I let you go, Robert, this past year we lost one of the greatest people ever to be called a Yankee, and that's, of course, when Yogi Berra passed away this summer. I know you're too young to have seen him play, but what's your favorite memory of Yogi Berra?
Oh, boy. I mean, I always go back to Larson's perfect game. I mean, you watch the way he just jumps on the guy and just really it's pure passion. The way he presented himself, the way he's always brought out, you know, at Old Timers Day and any event with the Yankees, the way he stood at home plate at the old Yankee Stadium with his number 8 on his back, and just, you know, you see these photographs of him, gorgeous photographs of the whole backdrop of Yankee Stadium, him standing there, this little old man that's been through so much throughout his entire baseball career and American career. The guy's an icon, and to think that 2016 at Old Timers Day, it will only be Whitey Ford walking out there, driving out in a little cart, and not Yogi Berra. It will bring a tear to your eye.
That was actually kind of the next question I was going to ask is, who do we have left at this point? And you answered it right there, Whitey Ford, and that's well put about Yogi Berra. I mean, just one of the most one-of-a-kind personalities ever to grace his presence with the game. And, of course, he would have to be a New York Yankee going through with it. Robert, thank you so much for joining me on my first episode. I hope we get a chance to catch up as the season goes on, and I hope there's a lot of good luck in store for your Yankees this year.
Oh, thank you. Paul, let me just tell your audience, I mean, you are a tremendous, tremendous talent, and I just want to let you know that I think that you doing this podcast is great for your career, and I back you 100%, and you can call me anytime you want, and that BYB jingle you made for me is everyone loves it, and we should put it on iTunes and make a couple bucks and be rich together. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
No problem. You know, I can't make any promises, but I'm trying to work on something for part 2 of the jingle. It's either going to be probably Ramones themed or maybe like Grandmaster Flash, like 80s rap themed. I haven't decided yet.
Well, listen, you're the master, so I'll let you handle that, and I look forward to whatever it is. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, Robert. It was great to talk to you.
You too, man. Thanks.
All right. That's Robert Casey, Bleeding Yankee Blue. Check him out. His website is bleedingyankeeblue.com. Follow him on Twitter at bleedingyankeeblue. Check out the website. You can also like them on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/bleedingyankeeblue. It's one of the fastest growing fan sites regarding the most popular American sports team. The writers are phenomenal. The articles are engaging. Of course, the theme song on the homepage is incredibly catchy. I should know personally. That's Robert Casey. Great guy. Tidbits before I sign off for the week. The Orioles signed outfielder Hyun-Soo Kim right before Christmas on a 2-year, $7 million deal. This move is a bold statement by the Orioles that the team is going to find creative ways to spend to win instead of throwing money at guys like Chris Davis, who declined their generous offer of $150 million over 7 years. I like the move, and like many others, I think Chris Davis will trend downward in the home run department coming up this season. Hall of Famer John Smoltz will replace Harold Reynolds and Tom Verducci in the Fox broadcast booth for the World Series this October. This is a step in the right direction for Fox, although I really thought Harold Reynolds brought an original, candid style that most players don't feel comfortable reaching in their post-playing careers in the booth. MLB TV might be doing a single-team in-market deal for those who only want to watch their local clubs streaming on their mobile devices. Though not much is known and no formal announcement has been made, while this is a step in the right direction, the league needs to heavily consider allowing a full package that includes every single team, since some markets, such as Iowa, get blacked out from multiple teams, which is absolutely ridiculous considering Iowa is home to 0 major league clubs. Thank you for listening to the first of what I hope to be many editions of the Baseball Weekend Journal. I want to thank Robert Casey from bleedingyankeeblue.com. Please check out his website. Even if you don't like the Yankees, him and his staff give a real down-to-earth take on the Bronx Bombers that is both informative and entertaining. I'd also like to thank those who have directly or indirectly inspired me over the years to get to this point and make a podcast about the game I love so much. Some of those people include Mike Mercado, Jeff Wright, Christian Simpson, Ryan Fahey, and Derek Cooley, to name a few. If I didn't mention you, don't be offended. Naming every single person that has made me the person I am today would be an entire episode in itself. Thanks again. Follow me on Twitter at Baseball Weekend, like Baseball Weekend Journal on Facebook. Feel free to email me with any questions, baseballwj@gmail.com, and as always, look for new episodes every Saturday. I'm Paul Shivari. I'll see you next week.